All right, hi everybody. I'm Chris. I'm gonna be showing you guys a really cool recipe tonight. I'm pretty excited about this one just because my family eats this, I would say, a couple times a month. And it's another really cool meat-free meal for you guys to try. I'm especially excited because we're cooking with one of my favorite things in the whole world, tofu, which for a lot of people is really scary. It's a scary ingredient. People are nervous about trying it. So I'm going to kind of show everyone step by step what I do to prepare my tofu so that people who are serious meat eaters might actually not be quite so scared to try it. And so let's get started. We have to prep our tofu before we start cooking. We're going to be making a stir fry with our tofu tonight. And we're probably, I would say, about an hour out from actually cooking dinner right now. Normally I prep my tofu and get it pressed, which is what we're going to do here in a second. And then I go and do stuff, shower, homework, whatever, while the tofu is being pressed. And then I can come back and just start cooking dinner. And stir fry is very fast to put together once you get going. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I have extra firm tofu here. You can find this at pretty much any grocery store. We use extra firm tofu because I have a child that has an aversion to textures. She doesn't like things that are squishy. So if you don't have that problem, you could definitely get firm. I wouldn't get anything less than firm tofu though, because otherwise it's not going to have a texture of meat. It'll break up a little bit when you cook it. Another thing that I like to do with my tofu is, this is a really cool trick, I freeze my tofu before we use it. So you'll get it from the grocery store in the refrigerator section. But if you freeze the tofu, because tofu is packed in water, the water expands when you freeze it and it changes the texture of the actual tofu itself. And it ends up having a texture that's a little bit more similar to chicken, in my opinion. And Jocelyn, my texture child, does a lot better with eating it if I freeze it and then thaw it and then press it. So this is just this is just thawed out in the fridge. So I'm going to take my tofu and I'm going to cut it open, and you want to be kind of careful when you cut your tofu open. And excuse any dirtiness over here, you guys. I am a mom and my house is never really clean. But you're going to see there's a whole lot of water in the pack. If I can get it in there, goodness. Okay. I'm trying to not cut my tofu when I do that. So I just kind of get as much of the water out of it as I can. This comes in 2 blocks. Sometimes your tofu will come in 1 block. Just get whatever your grocery store has. And you're going to see that it's kind of got an open texture. It looks very artificial because, I mean, let's be real, it's soy, so it is artificial. All right, so I got my blocks of tofu here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my tofu and I set it on, this is like a half sheet pan, and then I just set it on some paper towels, just like this. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to get a couple more paper towels, and I'm just going to fold them up, and I'm going to set them on top, like that. And then I'm going to take another pan, just use what you got, guys. And then I'm going to take something heavy. I happen to have a pineapple sitting here, and you set it on top of it. And then you just let it sit here. And what's going to happen is the pressure from the weight is going to press down on the tofu, and it's going to squeeze all the excessive moisture out of it. So now we literally are just going to walk away for a while, and then we'll come back to our tofu. All right, so it's been more than an hour probably since we pressed our tofu. And I've already come over here and I took the tofu and I cut it up into little bite-sized chunks here. So we're kind of ready to get started now on making our stir fry. So I'm going to go through everything that we need to make the stir fry tonight. For our tofu, I like to make it crispy. So what we're going to do is we're going to use cornstarch and rice flour. Both of these are gluten-free, and they make a really light, crispy crust on the tofu that the kids really like. And then we're going to make our own stir fry sauce. When you're eating any sort of Asian food, you have to be very careful if you have any sort of gluten intolerance. Soy sauce has gluten in it, and it will mess you up if you have a gluten intolerance. So you cannot eat at any Chinese restaurant, Thai restaurant, anywhere where they're going to use soy sauce, because they're not going to use gluten-free soy sauce, which is called tamari. They're not going to use that. You have to make it at home. You can buy bottled gluten-free stir-fry sauces, but they're very hard to find and they're pretty expensive. So I've just made it a habit of keeping the basic supplies you need to make a stir-fry sauce in my pantry all the time, and they're commonly used items in my opinion. So what we have here for our sauce tonight is we've got orange juice, because my family loves any kind of orange flavored sauce, and orange juice also lends some sweetness to our stir-fry sauce. I have tamari, which is gluten-free soy sauce. This brand, Sanjay, they're the ones that make a lot of the pre-made stir-fry sauces. You can get teriyaki and hoisin and a couple other sauces, but they're a little bit harder to find. I also have something called liquid aminos, and this is a soy sauce alternative. It is also gluten-free. I like to use this to make my sauce because the tamari is pretty expensive and this is not super expensive, and I can use like a cup of this and not feel like I'm spending a lot of money. So I'm going to actually use this for my sauce, and we're going to use the tamari to dress up our stir fry when we're all done. I've got rice vinegar. I've got sesame oil. This is really important. I've got sriracha. I've got ginger, and this is already like cut up and ground. I'm not all about that ginger root job. And then I got my big old tub of minced garlic here. I also have just canola oil. You want to use a neutral oil for stir fry because olive oil has flavor to it and you really don't want that in your stir fry. And then I've got a bowl of frozen stir fry veggies. You can use whatever frozen vegetables you like. My kids will end up picking out 50% of these vegetables. I'm not going to even mess with you about it. They'll probably eat the broccoli, the carrots, maybe the snap peas and the baby corn, but they'll pick out the mushrooms, they'll pick out the water chestnuts, and they'll pick out the peppers because they're picky. So it is what it is. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to get our breading, I guess you want to call it, whatever, the flour set up for our stir fry. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the cornstarch. This is going to also be used to thicken our sauce. So it's kind of a little trick I learned from Martha Stewart. So I'm going to take, I don't know what this is, like a third of a cup. I'm going to go with of cornstarch, and I'm going to toss it on top of my tofu. Don't pour this like directly out of the container. You'll have a huge mess. Cornstarch is super light and it just flies everywhere. I mean, unless you want to be covered in cornstarch, but follow your heart. All right, and then I'm going to take my rice flour. This is not quite so light, so it does okay. It's about the same amount, I guess, a third of a cup of the rice flour. And I'm going to salt and pepper this, and I'm just going to kind of toss it all around. And my tofu is super dry because I did my super spectacular job of pressing all the moisture out of it. So just give her a zhuzh with your hands. Don't be scared. And it's going to kind of start soaking up all of it very quickly. Tofu takes on whatever flavor you put on it. So if you want your tofu to have flavor, you need to season everything you put on it, and it just soaks it up because it's a big old sponge pretty much. All right, so we're pretty evenly coated here. So now we're gonna just get over here to our pan, and we're gonna put some canola oil in our pan and toss our tofu in and get it started. Wash my hands real quick. Okay, so now we've got canola oil in our pan. Our pan is hot. You want to use a non-stick pan for this. If you have a wok, good for you. I don't have a wok because that's just an extra thing, and we don't have a very big kitchen to keep it in. So you're just going to kind of toss your tofu in here. You want your oil to be hot because if you don't have hot oil, your tofu is going to soak up the oil, and you don't really want it to be like heavy oily tofu. That's kind of nasty. So I don't dump it in there because I want it to all, first of all, I don't want my oil to splatter on me. And secondly, because I don't want like little chunks of cornstarch and rice flour. I would just want my tofu in here. And they're just, you know, gonna sit here and sizzle away, and we're gonna get them nice and brown. My kids like their tofu crispy. And then once you add the sauce to it, the crispier your tofu is when you add the sauce to it, the better it's gonna hold on to that sauce. Like if your tofu is the outside of it's like mushy, it's not going to hang on to the sauce as well. It ends up being mushy. Nobody wants that. Gotta get all these little guys in the pot. And then once I get everything in here, I just like every once in a while give it a little toss just to make sure that everything gets oil on it. All right, so that's it. We're gonna let it sit here and cook. And while this is going, we're gonna go ahead and start making our stir-fry sauce. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start making our stir-fry sauce now. So I'm gonna start by using my rice vinegar here. I'm gonna add, I guess it's probably about a half a cup of the rice vinegar. And then I'm gonna take about half a cup of orange juice. We aren't making it like super orange chickeny. We just like a little bit of sweetness and flavor from the orange.
Rancid.
Yeah. Okay, and then to that we're gonna add our liquid aminos like we talked about. And this is like similar to soy sauce. We don't want a ton of this. I would say like a quarter cup-ish. And then our sesame oil. This gives it like amazing flavor, so you definitely don't want to leave the sesame oil out. And then I add my sriracha. Make it however spicy you like it. We are not good at spice. My kids aren't, so I don't add too much. I would say that's probably a teaspoon or so. Got some ginger. Of course, I forgot to take the freaking lid off the ginger. You guys get to sit here and listen to me try to, it's a brand new container of ginger. I can't get it open. I'm gonna add a teaspoon of ginger. You guys just probably won't see me do it on the video because I can't open the container. I'm gonna have to get my husband to open it for me. And a tablespoon of garlic. We freaking love garlic in my house, so you can't ever go wrong with some garlic. So I'm gonna get my ginger open, add my ginger to it, and then I'm gonna put the lid on the container and shake it up, and voila, I got my sauce for my stir fry. It's super easy. Okay, so we've got our tofu here. It's all crispy. You can see it's got like a little bit of brown to it. Their pieces are very crispy. I just transferred them out of the pan and back into the container that I originally tossed them in the flour in. So now we've got fresh canola oil in our pan, and we're gonna add our veggies. We're just gonna let our veggies cook for a couple minutes because they were frozen, so they need a couple minutes just to kind of thaw out. I don't wanna cook my tofu in the pan with my frozen veggies because they have a lot of water in them, and I don't wanna impart my tofu into that water. I don't want the tofu to get soggy in any way. All right, so our veggies have been cooking for about a minute or two now, so we can go ahead and add in our tofu. We're just going to get it back into the pan. We want to kind of make sure everything's zhuzhed together a little bit. And then we're going to take our stir-fry sauce that we made earlier, and we're just going to dump it in, and we're going to let this cook. And because our tofu was coated in the cornstarch, it's going to naturally create a way for the sauce to thicken. The sauce is going to take on some of that cornstarch. So just give this like a nice little, stir, and then just let it go. And you're just going to let it get here. You want it to definitely start bubbling. If it doesn't bubble, it won't thicken. That's science. So you have to let it sit here and cook for a few minutes, and it'll start to thicken up very quickly. And once it starts to thicken up, you want to just get that heat kicked off very quickly because it'll over thicken. And then if you do accidentally make your sauce too thick, you can add like a splash of vegetable broth to it, or a splash of water even. It's not going to hurt it, and that'll loosen the sauce back up again. So as you can see, we're already starting to bubble here, and we're just going to let this bubble until it thickens up. It might take a couple minutes, but it doesn't usually take too long. And then we're going to be ready to go. All right, so now we're at the point where I think that our sauce is, pretty thick. I'm going to turn the heat off here. It'll continue to thicken because my pan is still hot. So like I said, you want to make sure if it's starting to look like it's going to thicken, that you turn it off, you know, sooner rather than later. So, see, I mean, my heat's off and it's still going strong, but I've got one of those flat top stoves. So now we're just going to go ahead and plate it up. I've got jasmine rice here. This is the rice that my family prefers, and I make it pretty sticky. I don't rinse it or anything before I cook it because we like sticky rice with our stir fry. So I'm just going to get a little bit of the rice, and I'm going to get my delicious stir fry here, and there you got it. Looks pretty good to me. All right, here's our little taste tester. She's eating a piece of tofu. What do you think, Rory?
Yum.
So good.